COVID-19 has unleashed a dual crisis in India. First, the health infrastructure collapsed under the weight of hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions of infections. And now, the future of millions of children and young adults is at stake. Students have dropped out of schools and colleges by the millions. Many are taking up odd jobs just to survive.
This has been an absolutely unprecedented crisis. What we have seen over the last 1.5 years is heart-wrenching.
If 80 million, 90 million children don't have a future, what will happen to our country?
How will India deal with the twin disaster? Can the young be pulled back from the brink and be saved before they are lost forever? Bhagwanpur, the abode of gods. A congested town near the Himalayan pilgrim city of Haridwar. Far away from the fast-paced metropolises of modern India. These bustling towns today define an aspirational nation. Young people from smaller towns are breaking free, dreaming big, leaving a mark on the national landscape. But COVID-19 has ripped apart the lives of the poor in these towns who had dreamed of a new life. The vicious viral onslaught has killed 455,000 and infected 34 million in the country so far. Still, the death toll and infection numbers do not reveal the whole picture. Many of those who survived spend their days and nights in darkness, not knowing if they can ever resume from where they had left off 2 years ago. Tabassum Jahan is like any other 16-year-old. She was studying hard, believing that she could become a doctor one day. But that dream has now been derailed when COVID struck unexpectedly. It also ended all her chances of breaking free from the shackles imposed by a small-town existence. Her father, the sole breadwinner of a large family, died of COVID in May this year.
जी मतलब मेरा सपना तो था, लेकिन पापा के उससे वो चोरी हो गया, इसीलिए फिर कुछ मतलब बन नहीं पाई। क्योंकि क्या गए, एक तो पापा ही मतलब एक्सपायर हो गए और फिर ऊपर से जो डॉक्टर का सपना था उससे वैसे तो घर की कंडीशन इतनी ख़राब है जो मतलब कुछ भी नहीं है, फिर उसकी वजह से क्या अगर डॉक्टर का सपना तो अधूरा ही रह गया।
Tabassum's father was ailing for some time. But when the pandemic struck, the family was pushed to the brink of starvation.
हाँ, जब से कोविड भी आया है तो तब से तो बिल्कुल ही मतलब जब सबने यही मतलब बता ही दिया, फैल गई है अफवाह कि अब कोरोना है पापा को, तब से तो बिल्कुल ही हालात ऐसे हो गए थे कि करने वाला तो मतलब पड़ ही गया था। और फिर मतलब सारी बहनें थी, हम भाई जो है वो 8 साल का है, मम्मी बाहर जा नहीं सकती, मतलब फिर उसकी वजह से जो हम मोहल्ले के थे इन्होंने मतलब खाना पीना भी देना बंद कर दिया, जो पहला राशन बचा था।
Tabassum's school had closed in April last year when the lockdown began. Millions of children were locked out of their classrooms. Those from more affluent segments of society could stay in touch with their teachers as schools switched to online classes. But Tabassum was left out since she had neither a smartphone nor a computer.
नहीं, बस जब फ़ोन नहीं था और लैपटॉप भी नहीं था तो कैसे मतलब ऑनलाइन तो फ़ोन या लैपटॉप से ही पढ़ते थे। और जब होता तो मतलब पढ़ते भी, घर की कंडीशन इतनी ख़राब थी जो इतने पैसे नहीं थे जो मतलब फ़ोन ही ले लेते जो, तो इसलिए मतलब ऑनलाइन नहीं पढ़ा।
60-year-old Ashok Kumar Raturi is the principal of RNI Intercollege in Bhagwanpur. He agrees that only a fraction of the 3,000 students in his school could join online classes.
ऑनलाइन टीचिंग जो हमारा ये क्षेत्र है यहाँ बहुत टफ है। यहाँ पेरेंट्स गरीब हैं, हर किसी के पास फ़ोन नहीं है, और हैं भी तो छोटे फ़ोन है, स्मार्टफोन नहीं है। कि अगर हमारे यहाँ 100 बच्चे हैं तो 100 में से 20 बच्चे ही जुड़ पा रहे हैं, 20% बच्चे जुड़ पा रहे हैं, और जो 80% बच्चे छूट गए वो छूट गए। तो ऐसे बहुत बच्चे हैं जो बच्चे कोविड के बाद स्कूल नहीं आए, क्योंकि अधिकांश क्या है कि कोविड के समय जो लोगों की स्थिति वो बहुत ख़राब हो गई। हमने कई बार बच्चों को कॉल भी की, पर अब इस समय वो बच्चे यहाँ आने की स्थिति में नहीं है।
UNICEF says school closures impacted over 280 million students in the country, almost half of them girls. Initially, Tabassum had some hope. She knew when the school reopened, she could go back and resume her studies. That never happened. Being the eldest among her siblings, Tabassum has to earn a few rupees to put food on the table. It wasn't easy to make ends meet even before her father's death. But now, the situation is critical. On some days, the family goes without food.
और जब देखा कि घर के हालात इतने मतलब ख़राब हो गए, कुछ खाने को पीने को कुछ भी नहीं रहा, फिर तो मतलब कुछ तो सोचना ही था। फिर बड़ी तो मैं हूँ, जिम्मेदारी इसलिए निभा रही अपनी, थोड़ा बहुत काम कर लूँ, चूड़ी वगैरह का या सिलाई वगैरह का। जो पहला राशन बचा था वो थोड़े दिन चला, और उसके बाद कभी बना लिया, एक दिन भूखे सो गए और एक दिन मतलब खा लिया, जो सुबह बनाया वही शाम को खा लिया। अभी तो कुछ भी नहीं है, क्योंकि अभी तो कंडीशन ही ऐसी है। आज खाना भी बना लिया, कल को पता नहीं मिलेगा भी या नहीं भी मिलेगा।
The government programs are not even reaching the last girl, as I call her. The last girl is the person who is not just female, but she's poor, very often from an oppressed caste, and a teenager. And because of these intersecting inequalities, she gets cut off from her access to food, clothing, shelter, and of course, education, child protection. All the schools closed down during the pandemic. Plus, most parents lost their jobs. Some even died due to the pandemic. Because of that, there were some who were orphaned. There were some who had no food coming into the house.
India has borne a substantial brunt of the pandemic among nations. A significant outbreak of the Delta variant hit the country first, ripping apart the rickety healthcare system and leaving behind hundreds of thousands dead and millions infected. The devastation and trauma can be seen all over the country, from tens of thousands of unemployed workers on the streets to millions of poor forced to the margins of existence.
People have lost their livelihood, people have lost their loved ones, and young children have not been able to go to school. So the devastation is all-encompassing across spheres. But let me just give you some data that there's been tremendous amount of livelihood losses, and people estimate that almost 20 to 25 crore people will slide into poverty because of the pandemic.
Tabassum's tragedy highlights a fallout of the pandemic that might not be evident in the immediate future. She and millions of other children are facing the threat of becoming a lost generation, locked out of their classrooms and getting caught in the same vicious cycle of poverty and deprivation that their parents had faced. Tabassum's hopes of breaking free are now all but gone.
ये जो कंडीशन है, जो मतलब दिक्कत है, वो मतलब ज़्यादा नहीं, थोड़ा तो मतलब ऐसा हो कि खाने का या वैसा ये कुछ ऐसा आ जाए तो तभी तो स्कूल के बारे में भी ये सोचूंगी कि हाँ मैं भी पढ़ लिख कर कुछ ऐसा करूँ, या कुछ मतलब ये गरीब लोग हैं इनकी कुछ ऐसी मदद करूँ। स्कूल में भी तो मैं तभी जाऊंगी जब घर की मेरी मतलब दिक्कत ही, मतलब जो मेरे छोटे बहन भाई हैं उन्हें मतलब अच्छे से खाने को, ज़्यादा नहीं 2 टाइम का तो खाना मतलब मिल ही जा।
Education is perhaps the only avenue open to millions to escape poverty. But the large section of the present generation has now lost that opportunity. Recent surveys by economists have revealed the devastating impact of school closures on poor children. They say the lockdowns have caused a 4-year learning deficit. Students who have moved up in class during the pandemic have lost much of what they had learned before.
Stories, we know that these long-term closures have had a big impact on children's levels, learning levels and ability to learn. It's not just that they have lost this 1 or 2 years, but that they have gone back further. So children who were, let's say, in grade 3 or 4 at the beginning of the pandemic should now be in 5 or 6, but in learning terms, they may actually be back to level 2. So we are talking about many years of a gap being created due to lack of online access, due to, of course, deficiencies of online teaching as a mode.
This is a massive crisis. We shut down our schools in March 2020, and this is now middle of October 21. And in these 18 months, most of the children have not gone to school. And there are now experts telling us that this means that there's going to be a massive dropout, particularly of girls. There are estimates which say that there would be 2 to 3 million girls who would be dropping off the schools.
Despite the criticisms, the Narendra Modi government says it is doing all it can to look after the students who have become orphans.
So now Prime Minister has made a scheme that at least children, those who have become orphan because of COVID pandemic, so now there will be a corpus fund of rupees 10 lakhs. The scheme provides support for education and health for each child when he or she reaches 18 years or old of age. This corpus will be used to give a monthly financial support or stipend to take care of his or his personal requirement. A very ambitious scheme was announced by the Prime Minister. Now any children who has become orphan will be definitely looked after by the state, by the government of India, and for his education.
Schools are now reopening in phases after 18 months. Many of Tabassum's friends are back in the classrooms or are out on the school porch playing games. But Tabassum spends her days in darkness, cooking food for the family and waiting for brighter days to dawn. Will she be able to go back to her classes ever again? Or will she join millions of others in India's unorganized labor market for whom childhood is just a passing dream rather than a joyous rite of passage? Meerut, an ancient city located around 70 kilometers from the national capital of Delhi. Known as the sports city in the largest state of Uttar Pradesh, it boasts an illustrious history that goes back thousands of years. Like all other congested cities in the country, the pandemic has left its mark here as well, especially on the poor. 51-year-old Akshay Lal Chauhan had a struggling life as a cook in the sports stadium. He cooked meals for sportsmen and officials, earning only 12,000 rupees or around $200 a month. With his meager income, Akshay Lal couldn't really support his wife and 3 sons. So he went out again at night on most days, cooking meals at weddings and parties to earn extra for his family. He worked almost 20 hours a day to ensure that his sons became top sportsmen.
बच्चों को मैंने सोचा था कि स्टेडियम में ही रहता था मैं, अच्छे अच्छे खिलाड़ियों को देखा, शुरू से ही मेरा हाथ के भी बहुत अच्छे खिलाड़ी निकले हैं, तो मुझे भी एक अनुभव लगता था कि मेरे भी बच्चे हैं, मैं भी गेम में डालूं उनको, ये भी कुछ बन के कुछ देखा है। लेकिन उस टाइम भी मुझे समस्या आती थी क्योंकि छोटी सी कुक के काम पे कोई ज़्यादा मुझे सैलरी नहीं मिलती थी, ज़्यादा कोई वो नहीं था। उसमें मैं भी मेस में भी काम करते हुए बाहर के भी जो समय मिलता था उसमें मैं बच्चों के लिए कि आगे कुछ करूं, कि इनका भविष्य अच्छा हो, देश के लिए हमारे भी बच्चे नाम करें।
Akshay Lal's dreams almost came true. His eldest son, Sunil Chauhan, showed amazing talent as a boxer at a very young age. Sunil competed at the sub-junior level and then in the state and national competitions. In 2017, he got his first big break. He met the top boxer in his lightweight category and knocked him out.
मैं अभी पुणे खेलने गया था मैम, सीनियर नेशनल 2017 में। तो वहाँ मेरी पहली फाइट पड़ी थी। वो सबसे बेस्ट लड़का था वहाँ का ही, वो सर्विसेज का था पर खेल कहीं और से रहा था, सिक्किम से खेल रहा था। तो उसे मैं फाइट चली, स्टार्ट हुई फाइट मैम 10-20 सेकंड, सबने बोल दिया था इससे हार जाएगा कि सर्विसेज का लड़का है, वो दूसरी जगह से खेल रहा है। तो उसे मैंने पहले राउंड में ही नॉकआउट मार दिया है ना। फिर वहाँ पे सबके कोच, फिर नाम बहुत ज़्यादा उठा कि सुनील नाम से सब जानने लगे मुझे जब से। फिर नॉकआउट, इधर स्टेट में भी कई नॉकआउट मारे मैंने, स्टेट में फाइनल फाइट कई नॉकआउट मारी है, बस नॉकआउट की वजह से ही सब जानते हैं अधिकतर।
From that day onwards, Sunil began to truly believe in himself. He trained for at least 10 hours a day. He dreamt of participating in international competitions and bringing honors for his country.
कोविड से पहले मैम ऐसा था, सुबह हम 5 बजे उठते थे, 5:30 बजे उठते थे, 5:30 बजे ट्रेनिंग आना रहता था हमें। हम 8 बजे तक ट्रेनिंग करते थे, उसके बाद नाश्ता किया, 1 घंटा रेस्ट किया, उसके बाद फिर हम 11 बजे फिर वापस ट्रेनिंग पे, 11 से 1 फिर ट्रेनिंग करनी रहती थी। फिर 1 करने के बाद फिर हमें खाना खाना रहता था। खाना खाने के बाद फिर हमें रेस्ट मिलता था, रेस्ट 2 घंटे का रेस्ट लिया, उसमें 2 घंटे के रेस्ट के बाद फिर 4 बजे आए अपनी ट्रेनिंग करने के लिए। सपना है अपना कि ओलंपिक खेलना है, चैंपियन बनना है।
Unlike his elder brother, 19-year-old Neeraj Chauhan had fixed his eyes on a different target from a young age. He meditated and knew he had very good focus and attention. He was inspired by the archers practicing at the stadium. Like his brother, Neeraj won many competitions and finally the national honors.
मेरा चैम्पियनशिप अभी स्टेट लेवल की थी 2015 में, वो चंदौली में थी, स्टेट लेवल चैम्पियनशिप थी। तो वहाँ पे मेरा अच्छा परफॉर्मेंस रहा, वहाँ पे 2 गोल्ड मेरा 1 ब्रॉन्ज मेडल था। तो मैं नेशनल के लिए सेलेक्ट हुआ, नेशनल था वहाँ 2016 में नेशनल हुआ। फिर वहाँ पे रांची में फिर मेरा वहाँ भी अच्छा था, पर वहाँ मेरा मेडल नहीं था और परफॉर्मेंस अच्छी थी। 2018 में स्टेट लेवल चैम्पियनशिप हुई, उसमें मेरे 3 गोल्ड मेडल थे, तीनों में नेशनल के लिए सिलेक्ट हुआ। सीनियर नेशनल था मेरा पुणे में। फिर वहाँ गया मैं, वहाँ पे अच्छे लेवल के प्लेयर थे, इंटरनेशनल प्लेयर और नेशनल मेडलिस्ट। तो मेरा उन सब पे ध्यान ना जाके मेरे पे ही ध्यान था कि मुझे क्या करना है, मुझे कैसे करना है। तो वहाँ पे मेरा सिल्वर मेडल था, मैं 2 पॉइंट से चूक गया था।
But for the Chauhan family, life suffered a severe jolt when the pandemic struck. The stadium canteen, where Akshay Lal worked as a cook, closed down during the lockdown and he lost his job. It was the saddest day in his life, both for him and his family.
कोविड जब आया, जब यहाँ पे पूरी ऑल इंडिया में कोविड आ गया मैडम, उसके बाद हॉस्टल हमारे बंद हो गया। जो कमाने का जरिया था, रोजी रोटी थी, वो भी चली गई हमारे हाथ से। फिर हमने ये मैं सोचा कि 10 दिन के लगे, पहले ये हुआ था कि 12 दिन के लॉकडाउन लगेगा कोविड के, तो हमने ये सोचा कि 12 दिन कोई बात नहीं, वो किसी तरह में होकर। उसके बाद मैंने देखा घर में बहुत परेशानी आने लगी। फिर मुझे मजबूरी में, मैंने बच्चों को पढ़ाई भी था, उसमें आपका खेलते भी थे, अभी बड़ा वाला लड़का छोटा वाला भी जाता था। फिर मुझे बहुत समस्या, फिर मैंने ये सोचा कि क्यों ना सब्जी का मैं ठेला लगा के अपना घर के गुजर बसर करूं।
The family struggled to get 2 square meals a day. Both Sunil and Niraj stopped training, gave up their dreams of pursuing a sporting career. Their father, Akshay Lal, simply does not have the financial means to support them anymore after losing his job following the outbreak. They've been helping their father earn a few rupees every day just to make ends meet. The 2 national champions are now selling vegetables on the roadside.
बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब डिप्रेशन में डाल दिया है कि मतलब कि बॉक्सिंग तो गई। जितना मैंने सोचा था कि मुझे ओलंपिक खेलना है, ये करना, वो करना है, वो सब तो बिल्कुल दूर होती चली जा रही है, बिल्कुल दूर हो गई है, ऐसे कि बिल्कुल छीन लिया हमसे किसी ने। बिल्कुल नहीं हो पाएगा ये। इंटरनेशनल के लिए बताया, हमें ट्रेनिंग चाहिए, टाइम चाहिए और डाइट चाहिए। इसलिए थोड़ा और एक कोच होना चाहिए। जो कोच है अब उसे वो भी कराएंगे तो जब भी तो हमारी डाइट मिलेगी तभी तो होगा। अब हम चले जाएंगे तो इंजरीज हो जाएंगे, शोल्डर ख़राब हो जाएंगे, मतलब नी ख़राब होने लगेंगे। इसमें यही काम है, पंचेस चलाने पड़ते हैं, तो शोल्डर सबसे मेन है। तो शोल्डर इसलिए उतर जाते हैं, कईयों के आपने सुने होंगे कि शोल्डर उतर जाते हैं, वो इसीलिए क्योंकि डाइट नहीं मिलती है। जो हम पहले ट्रेनिंग करते हैं वो ट्रेनिंग ही मिल रही, तो हम परफॉर्मेंस बिल्कुल नहीं दे पाएंगे। उसने सब बर्बाद कर दिया, सब छीन लिया उसने। बहुत चीज़ें थी, बहुत सोच थी मेरी कि मैं इतना बड़ा बनूँगा, सब कोविड ने सब मुझे बर्बाद कर दिया।
It is a major crisis that we are looking at in terms of livelihood, families sliding into poverty. It does mean that people will not have a secure future.
Sunil is unable to understand why a national gold medal winner cannot get a good job. All he needs is a job that allows him to continue his training and look after his family. But his chances do not look bright in a COVID-ravaged country where millions are unemployed. Even though economic activity picked up in the last quarter, not many high-value jobs are being created. Underemployment is widespread.
जी मैं चाहता हूँ मुझे भी नौकरी मिले, मैं भी अपना घर का स्थिति थोड़ा संभालूँ और अपनी ट्रेनिंग और ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा अपनी ट्रेनिंग पे भी ध्यान दूँ। फिर डाइट भी थोड़ी अपना भी अप्रूवमेंट रहेगा, फिर माइंडली दिमाग जो है अपना संतुलन सही रहेगा कि जो अभी चल रहा है हमारा कोविड में, तो ऐसा तो नहीं होगा। अब जो हम चैम्पियन बने, इतना खेला हमने, चैम्पियन बनने के बाद भी नौकरी नहीं मिली।
Even though the employment rate is back, incomes are nowhere close to where they were before the pandemic. So we know that people are doing things that are not earning them as much money. So what are they doing? Many of them went into petty retail, street vending, selling vegetables, selling other kinds of things. Whatever they could find, they did.
The education and job crisis are deep and widespread. Many bright young men have dropped out of colleges and universities as well, forced to withdraw from the only avenue that was the escape route from poverty and deprivation. Will the government lend a helping hand to pull the young out of the dark tunnel before it's too late? India in 2021 is supposed to reap its demographic dividend. It has one of the largest young populations in an aging world. It has over 60% in the age group of 15 to 59 years, and it is estimated that the median age in the country is now 28. But the pandemic has laid bare the structural shortcomings and the deep fault lines in its educational, health, and social security sectors.
This pandemic has been like an X-ray, as many people have been saying. It has really highlighted the cleavages of this country, whether it is in terms of the inequality that we see, or whether it is in terms of the poor health infrastructure we have, or the vulnerable livelihoods that we have, or I would even say the lack of dignity the informal sector workers have in terms of their social security, in terms of their job security.
The story of deprivation and despair haunts the young population in all corners of the country. Avnish Kumar is among the few young men in a remote village called Narayanpur, where the literacy rate is abysmally low, around 60%, and literacy among women is just over 40%. Avnish Kumar is an exception. He even secured more than 80% marks in his senior school leaving examinations and was admitted to Delhi University.
उसमें मेरी परसेंटेज जो है सर 12th में 81% थी और मेरा फर्स्ट ही कट ऑफ में सिलेक्शन हो गया था। वैसे मेरा सिलेक्शन तो कई जगह हुआ था, अम्बेडकर यूनिवर्सिटी में भी हुआ था, इलाहाबाद यूनिवर्सिटी में भी हुआ था, अजमेर यूनिवर्सिटी में हुआ था, लेकिन मुझे बेटर दिल्ली लगा, तो दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में मैंने एटलीस्ट एडमिशन लिया।
Avnish started classes in a Delhi college. Then the pandemic struck, and his father contracted COVID. His father died in June this year, leaving Avnish with no option but to leave his college. He came back to his village and set up a shack on the village road to earn a few rupees. It's not a proper shop that would give him a decent income. It's just a way to spend a couple of hours to earn a few rupees. Avnish takes classes for children in the afternoon, which allows him to earn a few hundred rupees a month. His classes are big and well attended, since Avnish is a rare teacher in a backward village. He's passionate about teaching and gives all he can to the poor children. And he has to keep doing that since he has a large family to support.
एक भाई मेरा घर में मतलब इतना क्रेडिट हो गए थे हम लोग दवा करवाने में कि एक भाई पढ़ाई छोड़कर बाहर निकल गया कमाई करने, और एक बहन मेरी है वो पढ़ाई अपनी बंद कर दी है। बाकी जो छोटे भाई बहन हैं 6 और बच रहे हैं, उनकी पढ़ाई मैं अपने जिम्मे पे करवा रहा हूँ। मतलब हम किसी भी तरह से उनका फ़ीस पे कर रहे हैं, और फ़ीस पे करने का मेरा एक ही ज़रिया है। मेरे पास 25 से 30 बच्चे हैं जिनको मैं कोचिंग दे रहा हूँ, और उसी से मेरा घर का खर्च भी चल रहा है, और उसी में हम पढ़ाई का जो है वो फ़ीस पे कर रहे हैं।
Before the pandemic, Avnish had dreams like many other young men. He was aiming high and wanted to be a civil servant. He had begun to prepare for the tough National Civil Services examinations known as the UPSC exams.
जब हमने दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में एडमिशन लिया तो हमारा सर एक ही मकसद था, यूपीएससी क्रैक करना पूरा का पूरा, और हम 100% उसमें अपना लगा देना चाहते थे और कोशिश भी करते। लेकिन क्या हुआ कि पहले फादर की हेल्थ ख़राब, और उसके बाद इस पेंडेमिक में जो चल रहा था वही हो गया, तो मेरी पढ़ाई थोड़ा बाधित हो गई। लेकिन अब तो पूरी तरह से मैं ये समझूं कि मेरी बाधित ही चल रही है, क्योंकि इतना मेरे ऊपर खर्चे आ गए कि हम अपना एम तो लग नहीं रहा कि मैं अपना कर पाऊँगा ऐसा, क्योंकि मेरे पास पहली प्रॉब्लम तो मनी की है, दूसरी प्रॉब्लम मेरे पास जो है तो वो घर वालों की है कि हम अगर अपनी पढ़ाई देख रहे हैं अच्छे से तो घर वालों की सबकी डैमेज हो रही है पूरी स्थिति, और अगर घर वालों को छोड़ दे रहे हैं तो अपने में लग रहे हैं तो घर वाले वैसे ही बर्बाद हो जाएंगे सर।
Will Afnish get a second chance and rejoin his college in the national capital? Can he continue to pursue his dreams or fall by the wayside?
I think that is the fear. So what we saw before COVID, I would say for the previous 10 or 15 years was a very big education boom in India. We saw rapid increases in college enrollment. Lots of colleges came up. The average number of years of schooling have been steadily going up. So people have invested heavily in education, and even the education reports that came out, they emphasize that even very poor people, rural households, they've all understood the importance of education and are willing to invest in it. Due to the pandemic, the shock that has been experienced in terms of falling out of the education stream at various levels, early school, middle school, college, what do we see as the return path into education, right? All of these boys and girls and so forth who have been knocked off, are they going to come back? What level are they going to come back at? Are they going to do work that is much less requiring of much less education and therefore much worse paid? And that's what they do from here on out. We don't know the answers to all of these questions.
The answers are urgently needed in a country that's still reeling from the pandemic onslaught. India's pandemic response was found wanting at the start. The second COVID wave earlier this year had caught the federal and state governments napping. But in recent months, vaccinations have picked up and the country reached the milestone of 1 billion vaccinations in October.
I would say in terms of vaccination, we had very serious concerns early on. There was too much of fumbling around the vaccine policy. However, in the last few months, I must say that we've got our act together and we're doing reasonably well. We are being able to vaccinate and across the country, even in rural areas. So that's really good for the country. However, beyond the vaccines, we have really not been able to handle the situation well. I would say it's been a disaster. We saw during the second wave. I have friends, and I'm sure pretty much everybody in this country knows people who died during the second wave. I have friends who actually literally died waiting for oxygen cylinder at the hospital reception. It was a very, very difficult moment for the country, and the government did not know how to respond to the crisis. So I would say, apart from the vaccination, we have really fumbled all along.
Has the government finally got its act together? Apart from a successful vaccination drive, can it also put the lives of millions of young people back on track as well? It's not just students dropping out of schools and colleges. There are also young women who face the imminent threat of being pushed to a horror life of sex slavery. Can the government save the young whose lives and dreams have been gutted by COVID? Darkness is a part of life of the poor on the margins of society. Many have found themselves trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty, hardship, and deprivation. And breaking the shackles imposed by centuries of oppression and slavery has never been easy. Still, there are those who are challenging the established norms and practices to help free themselves from the traditional bondage and societal pressures. One of them is 19-year-old Rani. She faces such heavy odds that very few girls will ever encounter in their worst nightmares. She comes from a community where girls are sold off the moment they reach puberty. Rani's mother and sister are prostitutes. All the girls in the community are prostitutes. But Rani refused to walk down the same dark road, resisting the pressures from relatives who say prostitution is her only way forward.
मतलब उनका था कि पढ़ाई से कुछ नहीं होता, जो प्रोस्टिट्यूट जितना कमा लेती है उतना एक पढ़ा लिखा इंसान नहीं कमा सकता। तो उनका यही था कि कितना पढ़ लोगे, 10वीं पास 12वीं पास, तुम इतना पैसा नहीं कमा पाओगे। बट इसी एज में तुम मतलब 10वीं मत करो, इतनी छोटी एज में अगर तुम प्रोस्टिट्यूट का काम करोगी तो तुम खुद के लाखों पैसे कमा सकती हो, इतना कमा सकते हो। और फिर ये तो चेन ही है, मतलब कि तुम्हारे जो माँ है, तुम्हारी नानी है, सब लोग यही काम करते हुए आए हैं, तो तुम अलग क्यों जा रहे हो? तुम भी प्रोस्टिट्यूट का ही काम करो और इसी में पैसा कमाओ, फिर तुम्हें आगे तुम्हारी जो बहू आएगी, बेटी होगी, वो भी यही प्रोस्टिट्यूट का काम करेगी और वो भी तुम्हें यही इतना ही पैसा कमा के देगी।
Rani knows only education will give her a decent chance in life. She fled to Delhi with her young sister and got admitted to a school. She was doing exceptionally well in her studies, securing more than 80% marks in the senior secondary school leaving examinations. But her road to freedom came to a dead end when the pandemic struck and her school hostel was shut down.
जब लॉकडाउन लगा, पेंडेमिक का टाइम था, तो घर जाने का जैसे कि हुआ, हॉस्टल बंद हुए तो हमें घर जाना था। तो घर पे जैसे देखा, फिर वहाँ पे मम्मी सब कुछ बेच के जा चुकी थी, तो घर भी नहीं था। लॉकडाउन के टाइम पे जैसे मैंने मम्मी को उस टाइम पे कांटेक्ट भी किया था, और मेरे से कांटेक्ट करने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं, मेरे लिए तुम सब मर चुके हो।
They had no food and they were trapped in tiny rooms, sometimes 11 people in a room with iron bars in the window. And imagine, it's a red light area. People are coming to the red light area and demanding from the mothers that please give us your children in return for food. And they would sometimes say that, we don't want physical sex, but we want to use them to make porn videos. And it's not going to harm the child. It's just 2 years, she's not actually being physically raped. So why don't you let us have your daughter? She's doing nothing at home.
So this would need, this is obviously one of those heart-wrenching stories, but there's several of these stories. My colleagues who work across the country tell me similar stories pretty much on a daily basis.
It's now doubtful how Rani and her sister can continue their studies and not become sex workers. Like countless other young people, their future looks bleak unless the government can implement measures on a war footing to pull the young back to schools and colleges. For Rani, COVID finally finished what even the life's most harrowing nightmares couldn't.
कोविड के बाद फिर और परेशानियां बढ़ गई। मतलब पहले तो थोड़ा था कि हाँ चलो पढ़ लेंगे, अच्छे से कर लेंगे, आगे फ्यूचर देख लेंगे। बट कोविड लगा, फिर उसके बाद क्या हुआ, लॉकडाउन के बाद से पढ़ाई बिल्कुल बंद। मतलब ना कहीं पढ़ने की जगह, ना रहने की जगह, कुछ हॉस्टल भी बंद है। सब कुछ इतना बेकार हो गया था लॉकडाउन के बाद से कि अब कुछ था ही नहीं कि अब क्या करें, बिल्कुल ब्लैंक हो गए थे।
We must invest in public education system which ensures that all children have access to schools in their vicinity, in their neighborhood. So a whole range of educational reforms which were anyways overdue hopefully can be now brought in to try and address the huge gaps in the education system that we are seeing, which have now been highlighted because of the pandemic.
A lot of these children are in public school because they are going to government schools all over the country. So the government has a direct control in terms of putting in additional resources and starting those remedial classes the moment schools can begin. All of these things are on the table. I think nothing should be ignored in terms of the kinds of policy measures that are needed.
A recent study shows 100 million jobs were lost in India during the lockdown in 2020. Though most were back at work by June, 15 million workers remained out of work, and 230 million Indians have been pushed into poverty during the past 1 year. The country's rank in Global Hunger Index has also fallen from 94th in 2020 to 101st in 2021.
We don't take quick and strong enough action to emerge out of the pandemic, and it turns into a long, prolonged economic slowdown and so forth, then you might see persistent effects. You might see that there is not a quick reversal of poverty because economic growth remains low, investment remains low. People don't find their way back into the kinds of jobs that they had before the pandemic because those jobs have disappeared and are not coming back. So all of these things can cause long-term rises in poverty.
In Bhagwanpur, young Tabasum Jahan has minimal demands. She only hopes to get some financial support from the government that will allow her to go back to school.
मदद मिल जाए सरकार से, जो मतलब हमारे घर की जो आर्थिक समस्या है उन्हें मतलब पूरा कर सका, और फिर जो मतलब पढ़ने लिखने का है, मेरे भी जो छोटे बहन भाई हैं, वे भी पढ़ लिख कर कुछ मतलब वो कर सका, और मैं भी पढ़ूं और मेरी बहन भाई भी पढ़ा.
Champion boxer Sunil Chauhan is also full of despair. He wonders if poor people like him can ever dream big or should get into sports.
यंग लोग हैं जैसे जिन पे पैसा है वो तो स्पोर्ट्स तो कर ही सकते हैं, अब जिन पे पैसा नहीं है, अब जैसे ही हमारे घर में स्थिति देख लीजिए आप कि हमारे पैसे की दिक्कत से ही हमारे स्पोर्ट्स नहीं हो पा रहा आगे के लिए कि हम आगे बढ़ें. तो आगे जो है जिन पे पैसा है वो तो आगे बढ़ते चले जा रहे हैं, जिन पे पैसा नहीं है वो डाउन होता चला जा रहा है. आगे जाने के लिए भी तो डाइट चाहिए रहती है. जब छोटे पे थे हम तो खेल लिए, हॉस्टल में थे जब तक, तो अब घर पे आए हैं तो स्थिति बेकार है. पापा को लगा था कि जॉब लग जाएगी, नेशनल मेडलिस्ट है, अब नेशनल मेडलिस्ट के बाद हमें जॉब नहीं मिल रही है.
The dual crisis that India faces is deep and immediate. On the one hand, people are dying and thousands are getting infected every day. On the other, an economic disaster is threatening to push the young and vulnerable into a dark abyss. Can India allow the lives of a large segment of its young generation simply to go to waste? What will be the loss to the nation if that happens? It's not easy to quantify the economic costs of the calamity, but experts believe it's not even known what the cost in human terms will be.
There are a lot of people who've estimated how long will it take India to get back to the pre-pandemic GDP trend. And there are estimates out there, maybe 2024, maybe 2025, we will be back to that. So we're talking about at least 4 or 5 years. But that's just a very broad macro number. What does it mean for individuals? What does it mean for young people? There are really no good studies that I've seen.
What is clear, though, is that by 2026, India's average age would be around 28, making it the youngest nation in the world. Experts believe over the next 20 years, the continuing demographic dividend could add up about 2 percentage points to the country's per capita GDP growth. But that will happen only if the young are educated and have the proper skill sets to contribute to the economy. The government says it is aware of the problem and will never allow the demographic dividend to turn into a curse.
India knows that we have the benefit of demographic dividend, and this can become curse instead of dividend if we do not educate our younger generation and youth, and we do not give them skills. And that is something which is being done by the government. Government is extremely sensitive and sincere about this issue.
India is at a crossroads. Can it emerge a stronger nation out of the dual disaster? Or will it be weighed down and get stuck in the vicious cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and deprivation? Prime Minister Narendra Modi has proven his critics wrong many times in the past, turning setbacks into successes. Can he do that once again? Can India achieve an inclusive economic growth, taking all the segments of society along with it on the path to recovery? Will it be able to save its young generation who are sinking deeper into darkness and despair with every passing day?
One has to be optimistic that the ship has not sailed on many of these things, and it is not too late to act. The problem is big and it will require a lot of public resources, but we have those resources. There is a possibility of a lost generation unless we do something now.
This is going to be a lost generation. We're going to completely lose this generation, and all the big wins that we have had in terms of bringing children to school, it is a very, very bleak scenario that we are looking at. And if we don't take strong, immediate actions, unlikely that we will be able to retrieve this generation.
We are absolutely confident that younger generation will be put to track where they become a citizen which can contribute both for the nation as well as for the globe. And we will do everything possible to make their future very bright so that they contribute for the nation and the globe as well.
I am hopeful that they can be saved because human beings are resilient and we still have time.